Hi, and welcome to the channel. This is Cindy. I am decided to use a hidden spine for this journal, which means that you won't be able to see any of the binding. And that cardboard piece I have cut to be the correct size for the spine portion of the journal. I've got my signatures all ready to go. Instead of using a book cradle, one of these days I'll be able to get one, but for right now, I am going to use a book to punch my holes. I have measured the template, which is what I'm working on now, a ½ inch down from the top and a ½ inch down up from the bottom. And I am punching holes in the spine, approximately a third of the way over. So halfway in between the half mark and the middle mark and the edge. And I'm going to do that on both sides. I always mark my top because no matter how closely I measure, there is always a difference between the top holes and the bottom holes. So I mark the top of my template and I mark the top of my spine to make sure that I am getting that correct. And marking the holes, then I'm going to go ahead and punch them in. This does not have to be exact. If you are a measure person, you can absolutely measure each portion of this and draw lines down the spine to keep your signature in exactly the right spot. I am going to measure my cardboard. This is going to go over the cardboard spine. I'm using a file folder for this because it's a little bit thicker than paper. I like to use Tyvek, like a Tyvek envelope, but I didn't have any on hand, so this will work just as well. And it just gives you a little bit, it gives you something to glue the spine into the cover, which you'll see in a minute. So I'm cutting this to fit. And then I'm going to cut about 1 inch on either side of the spine, which is going to be about 3 inches because the spine is about 1 inch. So I'm just putting my measurement there, cutting that down, and then I am going to glue the spine onto the file folder. And here we go with the tacky glue. This will be turned over. This is part of an oatmeal box, I think. So I do tend to use up some of my cardboard boxes and things that we have that we normally throw away. If I'm working on something, I'll pull them out. I always have 1 or 2 in my box of goodies. So I'm putting this approximately in the middle and gluing that down. You can see from my marks for the spine that I probably should have moved the left-hand side over a little bit, and I may do that. I'm not sure. The book makes a really good spot to poke into. It cushions it so you're not poking into something hard. And I'm using the awl to do this. It's just a sharp, pokey thing. If you get a bookbinding kit, they almost always come with one. and they will also come with a needle. The hidden spine is pretty easy to do. It's very similar to just sewing in a regular spine, except that we're going to actually glue that spine in. I probably should have waited until this was dry. I'm just going to tell you, patience is not my virtue. I am definitely, I'm not a measuring person. I'm not an exact, I don't do anything exact. So everything is a little bit off, but that's what makes it unique. At least that's what I tell myself. It probably goes back more to my ADHD than anything planned. So now I'm going to take my book, and you can see here where we're going to glue this in after we sew it. So we do wait until after we sew it to glue it in. I'm going to just score this on either side so that I can bend that up. It does help to make that bend easier when you put it in, so it's not as stiff. So now we've got that there. And when we glue it in, we'll actually be sewing it to the other side. But you can see here where that is going to fit in on either side, and it gives us plenty to glue. And bending it up to just reinforce that bend a little bit more and making sure that it's going to fit inside. The paper here is in the way, so we're going to tear that down so that it has something firm to glue against when I do glue it in. Now we're going to use the exact same template to poke holes in the signatures, and I've got the top marked. Use the clip to hold the pages together so that they're not moving around. And once I put in the holes for the sewing, I actually do not take the clip off so that those papers stay fairly secure until I get them sewn in. It just makes it easier than trying to line them all back up. And they're still going to move some. You'll find every time I do this, it's always a little bit, see, it didn't line up. So now we are back and lined up to the top. Okay, I'm using embroidery floss for this because I have it on hand, and an embroidery needle. I use all 6 strands. And I have done this with pretty much all of my journals. I've never had a problem. 3.5 times the length of your spine is what I generally do. It's probably a little overkill. 3 would probably be more than enough, but I'd rather have a little too much than not enough. To get that on, I realized that my clip is somewhere. I realized that my clip is not actually all the way through all my papers, which is going to cause me a minor problem here. But it goes through the first one fine. We're going to go in from the inside to the outside of the middle, and then we're going to come back through the top. And if you can't get it all the way through, you can open these pages up and so you can find the hole. The first couple of holes are always more difficult, but after you get these done, it usually the last two are easy. Make sure you pull your string tight without pulling your other string through. Now we're going to go back through the middle hole. It's always easier to pull these through. Sorry, I'm off the screen a little bit. It's always easier to pull them tight when you're first doing them than to try to get them tightened up afterwards. You also don't want to pull them so tight that they rip through the paper. So it needs to be snug, but it doesn't have to be super tight. Again, we're going to go through here. I'm going to separate the pages so that I can get this through. Hold that snug. And then I'm going to go under the top one. Make sure everything's tight. I'm going to go under the top one. String sorted out here. And then I don't know, I think I go back under the other one. I don't know why I do that. You don't need to do that, but you can if you want to, just to give it an extra little bit of a knot. Pull it tight and make a knot. And then make another knot. And then you can cut your strings. You can cut your strings long or short. I usually leave them longer so that I can put a bead or a dangle or a bow or something on them, but it's really not necessary. So that signature is all sewn in, and now we are ready for the second signature. And we're going to use the exact same template. Make sure it's pointing to the top. This was such a mystery for me when I started. It was absolutely amazing that I could actually make my own books. And I have not stopped since. I actually don't buy art journals anymore. I sew and create my own. Now we are ready to sew this in. Signatures are all sewn in, and we are ready to put it in the cover. So at this point, we set this down into the center and line it up. And then we are just going to glue down those two flaps. And again, I'm using Fabri-Tac. It just gives a quicker binding. It is an acetone-based glue, and it makes a fairly flexible, when it's dry, it stays fairly flexible so that you could be used on fabric as well. But it does bind faster than regular glue. So I find for things like this, and sometimes in my journals, pockets and things like that, I also use a tacky glue because I feel like it gives a stronger bond. Just making sure there's plenty on here so that we can get it all laid down at once. I'm going to set that down in the center. Then I'm going to pull these down, press them down into the side. And there's our hidden spine. There's one more step that we're going to do, and that is to cover the front. There's actually, I do this with just a half a page. You could literally, and if you look at a book, you'll actually find that the first, the pages go over across both pages and is actually attached to the signature. And that just holds your book together a little bit better. I did not do that here. And again, I've not had a problem with it coming apart, but you know, if your book gets a lot of heavy use, then you may want to do that. I'll in another video I'll go through and show you exactly how I would do it. So I'm just cutting this to be the size to cover those pages. And then I'm going to glue that down. So if you were using a full sheet, you would actually put the glue on both that page and on the signature page. And I actually cut this too short, so I have to go back and add some paper to it. But yeah, now I'm realizing, I should have made it longer. I'm going to move it over a little bit, but in the end, I end up going back in and adding a second piece of paper onto that, just to cover up the file folder, the manila folder. And at the end of the day, since we're going to put a pocket there, it really won't matter. I do better on this one. Actually measure it. And then trim it. not going to take very much off, just a quarter of an inch. And applying the Fabri-Tac around the edges and specific, and then covering up some of the middle. It doesn't have to, the glue coverage doesn't have to be awfully, I mean, cover every piece of the background, but you do want to get the, be sure the edges are well glued and the middle has some support. And then we're just going to push this down into that seam. And our binding is complete. I may go in and put a little bit more glue. I am going to go back and fix this piece of paper. I'm just going to take one of the pieces that I offcut and glue that on there. Trim that edge up a little bit. Add my glue. And when we're done, we won't even know that, you won't even notice that it was done, that it had an extra piece on there. And there is our completed spine. A little bit more glue on the edges, I think. If you don't make sure the edges are glued down tightly, then you're going to end up with uh, them fraying and coming undone. So there we go. Uh, Again, you can barely even tell that that's there. When we add a pocket and some decorations, you won't notice it at all.